What's up, YouTube? So there's this idea that you sometimes hear in contemporary philosophy, particularly in ethics, sometimes meta-ethics, where philosophers will talk about adopting the point of view of the universe, or the view from nowhere. Um, so this phrase, the point of view of the universe, I think it comes from Henry Sidgwick originally. And the way that it's used in contemporary philosophy is as a sort of challenge to egoism, right? To kind of the rational egoist who says, the like I only care about my own welfare. I only care about my own good. So you can imagine somebody who is just purely self-interested. They don't care about anybody else, right? All they're focused on is just their own pleasure, their own welfare, right? And so the point is, well, um, if you look at things, from the point of view of the universe, then you can see that the welfare of one individual, the welfare of me, is of no more importance than the welfare of any other individual. So when I adopt the point of view of the universe, right, when I step outside of my own perspective, I can see that the selfish pursuit of prestige, wealth, power for myself without concern for others, it just seems sort of absurd, right? It kind of vanishes into insignificance when I see that other people are, just like me in the sense that they have their own interests, they experience pleasures and pains, and, their pleasures are just as important to them as my pleasures are to me, and their pains are just as bad to them as my pains are to me, etc. Right? That sort of, it encourages a less selfish attitude. Now, I mean, is this an argument? Is this rationally compelling? Well, maybe not. I mean, maybe you don't have to adopt the point of view of the universe. Maybe it's not rationally compelling that you do that. But it does hint at something that is perhaps genuinely rationally problematic with egoism, which is the arbitrariness of egoism. So you might say, well, if I claim that my welfare matters more than the welfare of others, or even that, that my welfare is the only thing that matters and other people just don't matter at all, well, it looks like in order to justify that, I would have to specify some relevant difference between myself and others, right? Like, what is it that's special about me? If I can't do that, then it's just arbitrary to say that I'm like my welfare is all that matters. I would be privileging my own welfare in a way that's analogous to how racism or sexism or whatever. Like if somebody's a racist and they say, well, black people just don't matter, that's completely arbitrary. You want to say, well, what's the relevant difference, right? What's the difference between black people and white people? I mean, okay, they have difference in skin color, but again, like black people have, they have minds, they have interests, right? They experience emotions, right, just as we do, right? That's so. What's the relevant difference? So I mean, okay, maybe you might say, well, this illustrates the arbitrariness of egoism, but on the other hand, um, it seems like you're only going to get that conclusion if you choose to adopt the point of view of the universe, because of course, from my point of view, there's a massive difference between myself and others. There's a huge, really important difference between myself and others. Like, obviously, I have a special access to my own interests. I have a special sort of control over my own actions. My own, pleasures and pains impress themselves upon me in a way that's completely different to the way that the pleasures and pains of others affect me. I mean, I might not be affected by other people's pleasures and pains at all. In fact, sometimes maybe I might quite enjoy it when I see other people in pain. If it's somebody I really hate, if I see Hitler in pain, I might be like, yeah, good, right? So, yeah. So the point is, it's like, well, the difference. Egoism only seems arbitrary when you choose to adopt the point of view of the universe. If I choose to evaluate things outside my own perspective. So yeah, it may not exactly be an argument against egoism, but at the very least, the thought is, I think, in contemporary philosophy, this at least sort of is telling with respect to egoism, right? It tells us at least if you choose to adopt the point of view of the universe, this encourages sort of selfless, moralistic sentiments. I mean, Sidgwick was a utilitarian. I think Peter Singer sometimes talks about, the point of view of the universe as well, and he actually has a book called that. So, yeah, anyway, the point is, right, is that in contemporary philosophy, this is used as a sort of tool to encourage people to adopt like moral values rather than egoistic values. Now, so that's the sort of use of it in contemporary philosophy. What's interesting is that this same idea has appeared at other times in the history of philosophy, but it's used in a very different way. So it seems that the philosopher Zhuangzi, who was a Taoist philosopher, had the same sort of idea, but applied in a very different way. I should say, by the way, I'm no expert at all on Zhuangzi. I may not be accurately expressing what his views were, so I just happened to be reading an article which was talking about this, which was talking about Zhuangzi's views, and I'm just kind of reflecting on that, right? So maybe Zhuangzi didn't say anything like what I'm about to express, but just take this video as sort of me reflecting on an article I read on Zhuangzi. Okay, so yeah, in Zhuangzi, I have read, Zhuangzi distinguishes sort of 2 points of view. On the one hand, there's the human point of view, and the human point of view is characterized by value judgments, judgments about things being, good or bad, things are such that, they ought or ought not to be done, etc. It's characterized by, epistemic confidence. So we think that we know the way the world is. We take ourselves to know quite a lot about the world, and we know what makes a life go better or worse. So there are some ways of life, some ways of being that seem clearly to be better than others. For instance, it's better to succeed than it is to fail, and we think that we know what constitutes success. Right? Again, it's about getting for ourselves, wealth and a good reputation and power and and access to good food and all of this. And if we think about it on a sort of societal level, well, it's good to promote those things for other people. We want peace and stability, and we want other people to have access to good food and clean water and all of that. Like, it's better to be alive than dead. It's bad to lie. It's bad to cheat. It's good to care for your family. Good to make money, etc. Right? Like these are the sort of judgments that I guess we sort of all make on a kind of everyday basis about what it is. We think we know what it is for life to go well, and we think we know how to achieve those things. So that's the human point of view. But then Zhuangzi says we can imagine adopting the heavenly point of view, and I take it that the heavenly point of view is essentially the point of view of the universe. So if you imagine the sort of whole sweep of the universe over time, right? From like the very beginning to the very end, and like all of the different things in the universe, all of the planets and stars, right? Imagine sort of adopting that perspective and seeing human life from that point of view, right? Where you sort of see, the actions of humanity as just one minor, insignificant part of this, vast cosmic, cosmic play, right? I mean, there's just all sorts of things going on. There's lots of things we don't know, and in particular, the kind of value distinctions and claims to knowledge that we make just seem sort of absurd from this heavenly point of view, or from the point of view of the universe, right? Like, because everything sort of reduces just to insignificance, right? There's all sorts of things going on in the universe, all sorts of processes that seem completely indifferent to us, and that take place on these vast timescales that we can't even, comprehend. Like we have no sense even of when we talk about like the, say, creation of a mountain, right? And think about the millions and millions of years that takes and how it's just totally indifferent to everything that's going on in in human society, right? Um, and again, like that's not. I mean, we can say the number, we can say 2 million years, but of course we don't even have any comprehension of that. So imagine sort of adopting that cosmic perspective, and you and suddenly that makes all of like human value seem ridiculous, right? Like, why do people care so much about the outcomes of events? What grounds could they possibly have with their limited experience and their poor cognitive capacities for drawing any grand conclusions? For Zhuangzi, when you adopt the point of view of the universe, um, we just become kind of detached from all value assessments. It's not just that you give up your egoism, and you care about others and so on, and you maybe adopt a sort of moral framework. It's that all value assessments go out the window, or at least all value assessments just seem kind of silly and absurd. So maybe one way to think about this is to imagine a kind of gradual stepping back from our own perspective, right? Like, initially, let's say, I care about myself, right? And I'm just interested in how I can experience pleasure and avoid pain for myself, and that's it, right? But then I encounter other people, and I realize that, okay, they're just like me, and they have their own perspectives on the world. So I'm seeing things from a particular point of view, but they're seeing things from their point of view, and I can also see that they're kind of just like me. They have minds and bodies and pleasures and pains, and so that it kind of puts some pressure, let's say, on the egoism. It makes me think, oh well, when I try to imagine seeing things from their perspective, I see that my pleasures and pains are no more important than theirs, right? So you sort of step back from that egoistic point of view. But you can kind of continue stepping back, right? So I've been brought up in a particular culture with particular conventions and values and particular types of like etiquette, let's say, right? The rules of etiquette might matter to me, I don't know. One of the things which I was told was once the case in Britain. I don't think it's really a rule anymore, but I believe it used to be the case that it was considered sort of rude to eat with your elbows on the table, right? That doesn't seem to be the case anymore, but like, let's say it was, maybe I was brought up in a culture where that's considered really rude. So that matters to me. I see somebody putting their elbows on the table when they eat, and I get angry about it. Or maybe just consider things like nudity norms, right? So I see a woman taking out her breasts in public, and I get mad about it because that violates the norms of my culture. But then, I encounter different cultures with different norms around nudity, with different etiquette concerning how people should eat at the table. And I perhaps see that those cultures seem to be doing perfectly fine, by their own sort of standards at least. Those societies function perfectly well. And so again, that's like, okay, that challenges my commitment to those conventions, commitment to those values and norms. I become sort of detached from them. But then we can kind of keep stepping back, we can step back further, right? So like, one of the things that sort of still matters, right, is I still think, well, there are certain things that pretty much every society seems to care about, right? We want peace. We want to promote pleasure and avoid pain. And so if I see somebody like torturing a child, right, that fills me with horror. But imagine how, I don't know, a lion might view the torture of a child, right? If a lion was to see a human being torturing a child, right, what would the lion think of it? Well, I mean, it wouldn't care, right? It wouldn't think anything. It would. I mean, maybe it would see it as a potential food source, but that's about it, right? So the lion would just be concerned with it on that level. It certainly wouldn't be filled with any kind of horror. And if you kind of imagine seeing things from the lion's point of view. It's like all of the sort of values that we have just seems silly from that point of view. Um, so yeah, there's this like progressive kind of stepping back and imagining things from, like you can kind of like imagine sort of trying to build the lion's perspective into our perspective or something like that, and then that uh, reduces the confidence that we have in even our most basic values and our most basic assumptions. Um, or maybe it's similar to how uh, I don't know, if you think about various atrocities throughout history, right? They strike us much more forcefully the closer they are in time, the closer they are to us. When you read about atrocities that happened, 2,000 years ago, I mean, you might think, oh yeah, that's bad, but it's probably not going to provoke the sort of really strong emotional reaction in the way that if you read about, say, the Holocaust, that provokes a much more strong emotional reaction. So you have the same, you might have like the same beliefs about what happened, but uh, viewing those beliefs from different perspectives, um, you have like different reactions to it, and so it seems like sort of Zhuangzi's point of view would be, well, when you adopt the heavenly perspective, when you adopt the point of view of the universe, just all of the sort of things that we're concerned about, all of the values that we have, look absurd or insignificant or meaningless. So taking the point of view of the universe means losing not just egoism, right, but like value in general. There's a nice quote from Carl Sagan that I think embodies both of these both of these points of view on the point of view of the universe. So I mean, when we talk about the point of view of the universe, you can like use it to push a kind of humanistic, or maybe I should say sentientistic line, right, where we're like encouraging a moral perspective, or you can take Zhuangzi's view and just use it for like a general skepticism of values, right? And I think that these two views of the point of view of the universe are embodied in this quote by Carl Sagan, "The Pale Blue Dot." There's a couple of videos on YouTube which have Carl Sagan reading "The Pale Blue Dot," and it's worth looking up because it's a really lovely quote, it's really beautiful, poetic quote. Basically, he's reflecting on a photograph that was taken of the Earth from millions and millions of miles away, and it's just a little pale blue dot. It's a tiny, pixel in a sunbeam. And what Sagan says is like, look at that picture and consider that like everyone that everyone you've ever heard of, every religion, every economic ideology, every scientific theory, all of that was created on that pale blue dot. And then think of I can't remember the exact quote. He expresses it in a really beautiful way, but he's like, think of the rivers of blood that were spilt by politicians, so that they could, for a fraction of cosmic time, call themselves the masters of a fraction of that dot. Like all of your concerns, all of your kind of values, right? Everything that matters to you, it's all there. It's this tiny dot suspended in a sunbeam, and so there's like, in some ways, like, you can kind of see both ideas here, right? I think Sagan probably intended this to be read in a humanistic way. So we think of the rivers of blood that were spilt so that somebody could be the master of a fraction of a dot, and we think that's kind of horrifying. But there's also, again, I think there's the sort of skeptical reading, right, where even those rivers of blood just lose their force. They fade into insignificance. It's like, against the vastness and complete indifference of the universe, all like all of the processes, the mountains being forged, the planets flying through space, these massive systems just kind of churning away, completely indifferent to human life. And then you sort of think about, you kind of contrast that perspective with how much you care about the rivers of blood, by like how the horror that you're filled with at the rivers of blood, and then you contrast it with this cosmic perspective, and doesn't your horror just seem ridiculous? Doesn't it seem absurd? Indeed, it's kind of like one way you might sort of challenge, I suppose, the humanistic reading of this is to say, well, do the rivers of blood matter or don't they? Because if they do matter, if they are really important, if they are the sorts of things that you should be filled with horror about, then actually it's quite understandable why somebody would want to be the master of that, isn't it? The master of something that matters. So anyway, yeah, I'm not. I'm not making any kind of point with this. It occurs to me I've now been talking for like 20 minutes, which is quite a long time to talk without really making a point. But I just thought it was kind of interesting, right? To see how this same idea, the point of view of the universe, is used by a lot of contemporary philosophers versus how it seems to have been used by philosophers like Zhuangzi, and how you have this sort of conflict between the humanistic reading and the kind of skeptical reading. Of course, what's really going on here is that there's no such thing as the point of view of the universe, and the very idea of trying to adopt the point of view of the universe is completely absurd, right? And that's why what's really happening is, right, we are thinking about the universe, right, comparing the universe to our sort of everyday lives, and then that can prompt different reactions. So that may prompt the reaction that, oh my goodness, right? I don't matter. Humanity matters. You know, it can kind of prompt the humanistic reaction, or it can prompt a skeptical reaction where you're just like, oh, wait a minute, nothing matters, or at least maybe things do matter to me, but maybe I'm more detached from my values. Actually, Zhuangzi didn't exactly draw like a skepticism of values, but his claim was more that you continue to endorse values, you continue to care about the same things you cared about, but you do so with a sense of detachment that produces a kind of a kind of calm, right? So yes, you can care about things, but it's there's a kind of detachment to it, a sort of skeptical attitude to it. So yeah, anyway, well, that's it. That's all I have to say about that. So thanks for watching.